Working on your career coach. Today we're talking about resumes. Now, this is one of those areas that gives people so much angst and so much frustration and discomfort, and it just doesn't have to be that hard. My take is that people spend way too much time and money agonizing over it, so I'm going to give you all the tips that you need to make it really simple and straightforward. We're going to cover some dirty little secrets. What do you do with some of that information that might be a little bit sensitive, some of that past experience you don't necessarily want somebody to know? And then we're going to go into the do's and don'ts to keep it really straightforward and simple. A couple different ways of addressing some of these uncomfortable situations on your resume. First, in the event that you were fired. Very uncomfortable, but not the end of the world. Make sure that you account for the time. You're not going to say this on the resume, but you are going to indicate that you were employed by this organization for however long it was. Even if it was less than a couple of weeks, maybe you can skip it. But anything more than a month, make sure that you put it on there so that someone can check and even verify the fact that you were employed. And I'll teach you in another chapter just how you can address that in an interview, what words you might use to keep it nice and clean and safe. The other eventuality is a layoff, and that's pretty common in these economic times. So don't be embarrassed. In fact, I think you can put it on your resume if you were part of a large workforce reduction. Let's say there were 7,000 or 10,000 people laid off. You can say that you were one of those people, and it doesn't necessarily tarnish your reputation. Make sure that you understand the real reasons behind the layoff and why you were selected and maybe not somebody else, because if there was a performance-related concern, that might come out in a reference. And you need to know that to be able to kind of head it off at the pass, again, when you're in that interview situation. So, firing, leave it off the resume, talk about it later. Layoff, put it on the resume, presuming you understand some of the reasons, and be prepared to discuss it further in the interview. When I was an executive recruiter, I used to see a lot of different resumes, and the ones that frankly bothered me the most were the ones that left me hanging. So it said that you were still employed, and yet you left 6 months ago. Well, gee, why haven't you updated your resume? What might you be hiding? That's not a good idea. The other ones were the ones where they said, I ended my employment on this date, and then there was nothing left for a number of months. That's not good either. So let's fill in the time from the date that you left. If it's been a couple months, it's okay. You can explain that you've just been, doing whatever around the house and getting your head about you and conducting a search. But if it's been 6 months, 9 months, a year, you need to really start accounting for that time. And so it can be any number of things. It could be that you've set up a consulting business. That's perfectly fine, but make sure that it's the truth, and make sure that you've got some clients to talk about and some revenue targets that you can actually talk about. Another way to account for time is to talk about maybe it's been volunteering that you've been doing. You can list this. If it's been 6 months since you left your job and you have been looking for a job, but you've also been volunteering regularly someplace, that can send a really good signal about your discipline and the way that you're getting out and conducting your job search and balancing that with something that you're passionate about. Another way to do it would be to say, put a line there that says, conducting job search, and talk about some of the jobs that you've been seeking and some of the feedback that you've been getting. Don't be discouraged about any gaps on your resume. The point is, don't leave the hiring manager or the recruiter hanging. Be honest, straightforward, and let's get you ready for the interview. At the beginning of this chapter, I encourage you not to agonize over your resume. It's just not that complicated. So here's some simple do's and don'ts to consider. Keep language simple and concise. No long run-on sentences that turn into paragraphs. Use numbers to help tell the story. I want to know how many people you manage, what your budget was. Number it, quantify. Assume readers are well-read but not experts. Leave out all those little words, buzzwords, acronyms that mean something only to you. Mind your formatting. No artsy script, no minute type style that makes older people have a hard time reading it. Keep it straightforward and easy. Maintain visual balance and symmetry on your resume. Make sure that you're not filling the page with a block of words that are just scary to the reader. Don't feel compelled to list every single responsibility and reward you've ever gotten. My rule of thumb is to list 3 accomplishments and list 3 responsibilities. Big difference between the two. Do not cram everything onto one page. Very often in school they'll tell you to limit your resume to 1 page, but if you have 25 years of experience, that's simply not enough. My rule of thumb is 25 years of experience, 3 well-written pages is absolutely readable. Don't make a mockery out of your resume. No cute, silly paper and fancy font and pictures. most submissions are electronic anyway, so just make sure that it's nice and clean, easy to open. You're going to laugh, but I've seen it. Do not forget your contact information on your resume. Make sure you've got a cell phone number, a home number, your address, and your full name. And for women who are married, include your maiden name. This one is basic. Proofread your resume and get somebody else to proofread it for you. Typos and other errors send a clear signal that you are careless and don't pay attention to detail. Let me mention something else relative to resumes, because very often I found that employers are asking you to fill out an application. Sometimes that's in addition to a resume, other times it's in the absence of a resume. And one of the things that you need to be careful to do is understand what the information is that they're asking you for, and you're very often going to be signing at the bottom, so be very, very careful that you understand what it is that you're signing away. Now, a couple things that might be on that application that aren't going to be addressed on your resume might be things like background checks, reference checks, credit checks, criminal checks, pending litigation checks. And at all costs, be honest. This is a case when full disclosure will benefit you. And part of what you need to start thinking about is how you want to address the questions that might come up related to some of those issues, if indeed you have them. So in this chapter, we've covered resumes. We talked about basic do's and don'ts. We talked about gaps that you might have had in your employment. We talked about some other sensitive or uncomfortable situations you might need to address. The point is, be honest. You really are ready for just about everything. This is your call to action for resumes. Write down 3 responsibilities and 3 accomplishments. They're different. Find 3 comments or adjectives that describe you as a person, not just what you do. Lastly, be able to answer this question. What do you want someone to think when reading your resume? I'm Jenny Clark, helping you navigate your career map.